Massive controversy revealed on Guild Chat last week in which a developer reveals the Fractals of the Mists are done.
Yep.
Bye.
We fixed Cliffside. Fractals are done.
Okay, that's not true. Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Yay for taking quotes out of context. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about Guild Chat. This is the stream that the devs host, talking about upcoming changes to the game, but more importantly, their intents behind changes and goals, objectives for current things that have already just gone in. So, we did just have the spring update, and they had an extra length specifically on the content of this update, which, as you guys should know, touched on so many different areas of the game. They obviously had a lot of different devs to talk about a lot of different things. In fact, it was broken up into multiple different sections, and I was expecting there to be a guild chat this week as well, but I guess there wasn't. So unlike normally where we would double up, unfortunately not going to be doing that today. The footage in the background will be a bit of PvP. I've started playing a Condi warrior. I think the game you guys are going to see, if there's more than one, maybe there'll be a more fair one, but the one that you're definitely going to see was not a fair one at all, and they just kind of gave up in the middle, but it's been pretty interesting. And I don't know, I know warrior's not particularly strong, but that might be what I go for next season. And then a mix of the new areas that they added to the game as well. A little bit more of a tour of the aerodrome, a little bit more of the golem DPS testing. People have really grabbed that with both hands. I'm not too much of a maths guy. I'm not too excited about that kind of stuff, and I definitely don't partake in that kind of content, like heavy raid content all day, every day anymore, like when I used to dungeon a lot. So I haven't used it too much myself, but we'll have a fiddle around. We'll see what this stuff looks like. So let's jump in. As I say, it was broken into lots of different sections. The first one was with Mike Z and Byron Miller. And these two guys revealed something that I think is very important for the community to look at. And this is specifically that the people who worked on the spring update are Expansion 2 people. So we know they have a team. I think the number was around 70 people, the ballpark, who are working on Expansion 2. And for all the criticism that was levied at Arenanet back with the Legendary Weapon decision, where they got rid of the Legendary Weapon team to work on live updates, and everyone was saying, oh, why don't you just get rid of the Expansion team, and so on and so on and so on. You can see how poorly guided and misjudged a lot of that criticism was, considering they are doing that. They had already done that. Expansion 2 team weren't even able to work on Expansion 2, and it's those guys that have been asked to go back and look at Heart of Thorns. I think this is really smart for a number of reasons, and one of the best to me actually is it means these 70 people who are so focused on the future have kind of had a stopper there and been told, hey, look, let's look back at what we already did, and it's these 70 guys that know exactly what the main pain points of the expansion were. So that's a term we're going to hear a lot. I guess a pain point is where the player base didn't quite feel they were super satisfied with what Arenanet put out, so there were different pain points in different areas of all the different game types and so on. But so what's going to happen now that the spring update's gone through, and largely they managed to hit their mark and they managed to make everybody pretty happy, it means that those 70 people are well aware going into the next expansion of exactly what the traps were with the previous one. I think that is awesome, and I think it's really hard to complain about that. Obviously, I really like the idea of lots and lots and lots and lots of content being in Expansion 2, and I don't want them to ever stop working on it, but this was a smart move in my opinion. I quite liked it. So Mike Z is the lead designer on Expansion 2. Obviously, he's not here to talk about Expansion 2 today. And Byron, I think he's primarily designing raids, but I also think he had a hand in the new areas we got with the DPS golem. So both of them had something to say. First was on the topic of dailies. This might sound really boring. I mean, dailies are old hat to us at this point, but I'm going to fixate on it. And why? Because I actually think the daily system right now is several tiers better than it's ever been in all of Guild Wars 2. And so Mike was talking a little bit about this, about the new dailies that are available. You get a flat 2 gold every day now, and that helps so many more people actually feel encouraged to do the dailies. You guys will remember the last big overhaul we had to dailies, they added specific chest rewards on each one. And the idea was you do the dailies, not for the AP necessarily or whatever, but you do it because the chest itself was the incentive. And obviously those chest rewards are things people have never really cared about that much, and except in very specific cases, like in PvP, people really like the PvP potions and so on, especially how that interacts with guild content. But the chests weren't enough. But you see, they've just put that flat 2 gold on there. Now you get the chest and you get the 2 gold, and there are a lot of people doing dailies. You know, I couldn't have really talked about this when I first covered the spring patch because I hadn't had time to have it settle in and see how the variety of new dailies that have been added to the list actually impact things. But It is awesome. You check out, like, when they have a daily dungeon on there. They were talking on the stream about how it was quite unfortunate that daily dungeons started on Ara and everyone was out of the swing of things and wasn't quite willing to try Ara. But, you know, over time, people will get more into it. The daily dungeon has been really cool. But specifically, the daily jumping puzzles, man. Those are so awesome. They're not like generic do a jumping puzzle somewhere. They are a dedicated, specific jumping puzzle. And so many people want that 2 gold now. When you go to these, they are amazing. Every day when a daily jumping puzzles come up and I've gone to it, it has been a lot of fun. In fact, you should see in the footage in the background, yesterday's daily jumping puzzle before I record this video was one of the labs in Fireheart Rise, one of the Asura labs. And this is quite a sizable place with lots of different areas. Like every chamber and every hallway of every room had multiple people wandering around and looking at different things in the corner, admiring the sharks and the tanks and fighting the bosses and completing the mini challenges as it went along. It was amazing. And especially that kind of jumping puzzle where portals don't trivialize the content too much. It's really cool, and it's been like that day in, day out, day in, day out. I really do mean it when I say I wish that dailies had been like this since way back at the start of Guild Wars 2. You would have found a lot more people, especially when it comes to like achievement point leaderboards and stuff, who were still in the run-in and still had that incentive to keep the game installed and keep going. It's fantastic. So they talk a little bit about the dailies, talk about the implementation of those, about the fact that some of the really hard jumping puzzles aren't there, like not so secret. So every day it's at least something that is reasonable to complete. So if you ever want to see 1 million people in there, then, well, you might just want to tell your guild about it and go for it with an achievement or something. So next up, Byron had some stuff to talk about. He's really pulling no punches, by the way, making it clear, and damn right he should be making it clear, that Quaggons are stupid. Telling the home truths that everybody needs to hear. I applaud you for that. Almost didn't have to say anything else for the rest of the stream. Okay, all right. So in all seriousness, he was talking a little bit about the new testing facility that was added, and something kind of interesting about how you could perceive this update as being a philosophy shift for Arenanet, and he's kind of saying it's not. So what do I mean here? Well, Guild Wars 2 doesn't have an inspect feature, right? In many MMOs, you'll be able to find a person, right-click them, look at them, and you'll be able to see all of their gear exactly laid out, their build, and so on and so on. Many other MMOs have support for add-ons or natively support DPS meters and proper first-party tracking of how much damage everyone's doing to allow people to see very clearly what each other are accomplishing in content. But what you tend to find in MMOs, though this is a great idea and open information, generally speaking, is an applaudable thing, you tend to find in MMOs this promotes a lot of toxicity between players, a lot of opportunity to discriminate, and it promotes this idea in MMOs that has been prevalent in so many in the past and so many in the future too. Especially if BDO's taught me anything, it's that these features encourage players to be assholes to each other, and it takes away the fun part of socializing in an MMO. And a lot of people, there's discussion there. I'm not saying that this is right or wrong. There is a discussion there, but I would say that the majority of Guild Wars 2 players and the community that Guild Wars 2 has built and the principles that generally Arenanet have stood by has fostered a community of people who agree with this general stance that this open information is a toxic thing in the end, and people would rather see less of it than more. And so that's kind of been the philosophy. That's been well understood. And now we have this patch and we have this facility go in the game that allows people to really meticulously tell their damage, and it will show their damage come out. So is this a philosophy shift? And I think Byron put it in a really interesting way. First of all, I'd say I think these philosophies I'm talking about right now are not specifically just to Guild Wars 2, but I think that Arenanet stood by a lot of this stuff even back in Guild Wars 1 also. And in Guild Wars 1, we had DPS testing in the Isle of the Nameless, and it didn't necessarily do any damage, it just helped people find out how their builds performed. And I think this just simply comes down to a question of its implementation. Is this a full-on DPS meter that is live and running for every player, thrown on everyone's UI every time you step into a dungeon or a raid or any scenario where you're on a team? No, it's not. Is it information that it's even displaying to other people? Not necessarily. It's information for you, and it's up to you at your liberty to share that out, and people can't force you into doing that. And if they're trying to force you into doing that and you're not happy with that, there are always going to be other communities and other teams that you can join. And interestingly, the discussion on the stream kind of led into a cool area, always a tricky area to talk about, and this is the idea of, should players be able to play the game the way they want with whatever old build that they've invented because that's what they find fun, or should they be forced to run like some kind of specific build to clear specific content?
I think really like my approach to that is raiding is about being in a, on a team, and right, and like the success of the team has to become paramount, right?
And I think the devs hit the nail right on the head here, that that 90%, most of Guild Wars 2 caters to the former of those categories. Most of Guild Wars 2, especially in PvE, allows you to run whatever the hell you want. That's just the way that it goes. For the solo content, the game is generally easy enough, the bar is low enough that there are a huge amount of viable builds, and Guild Wars 2 caters to that community very heavily. So is it a philosophy shift if then they add a little bit of content that is so hard it pigeonholes people into specific builds, as we see with raids, and maybe they intend eventually in high-scale fractals? And I think the devs came to the conclusion that no, because they're catering to both communities, and still, even to this day with raids going in, the majority of content, and when a new expansion comes out and when New Living World comes out, it's still all going to cater primarily to those people who can just play whatever fun build they like the idea of. And so yeah, they kind of went on an interesting tangent there. It was nice to hear from the devs where they kind of stand, and I think it's a fairly agreeable position. The idea is that raids are a team-based scenario and environment, and sometimes to be a part of the team, you have to run a build maybe that wasn't your first choice, right? And that's just sort of the nature of the game. But in any case, curious what you guys think, but that was pretty much their section. Let's move on to section 2, and this was with Ben Arnold and McKenna. And these guys were talking a little bit about some of the economical changes, I guess, and then fractals. So McKenna was talking about Scribing. So Scribing, I've done a video on since the patch. I did a stream on since the patch. I actually am now 400. Yay, I just had to build the guild war room all the way up, and then it became really, really, really easy to do. She was kind of talking about the process of Scribing and the cost of decorations and what changed. One thing actually I missed when I did my spring update, I told you guys that Scribing had kind of been fixed because resonating slivers, the cost of them in a lot of recipes had gone down. Well, she points out here on the stream as well, actually, that you just get resonating slivers for way more than just guild missions now. And apparently you're getting them from dailies and stuff, which I hadn't even noticed, which is quite terrible considering how many dailies I have done. But so apparently you get lots of these shards all over the place now. That's all contributed to lower costs. And she was just talking about weird inconsistencies, ideas in Scribing that people had pointed out to her. Hey, why is it this way? And most of the time she was like, yeah, this could be changed. And so it was changed. The most interesting thing about this Scribing talk here, and something I haven't mentioned on the channel yet, is the Globe of Whispers decoration. There's a bit of a story here, something I have alluded to many months ago. So back when Heart of Thorns came out, I guess one of the harder things to develop for Scribing and understand was how do you incorporate the idea of prestige decorations? Prestige decorations, for what it's worth, I think are a great idea. It's a really cool thought that there should be some insanely difficult to get decoration that you can show off on your guild hall, and it isn't supposed to be sort of a generic regular thing and an accessible thing. But I think Arenanet got the numbers way off. There were way too many decorations that were way too expensive, and most importantly, a lot of the decorations that were super expensive and should have been prestige decorations didn't even look that good. And the best example of this was a globe you could get, a little globe of Tyria, you know, like you'd find in Cordicus's mansion, where you'd walk into the main hallway and there'd be a little, like, globe there. You could get one of these, but it would cost you a gift of exploration to craft. A gift of exploration! So this is map completion. This is what you would use in creating a legendary weapon. You'd have to give one of your 2 up just to create this. And it was just this pissy little thing that most people would overlook. Definitely the best example of what I'm talking about here. And the spring update changed this. Actually, I don't know how it works now, whether you just build that old globe into another one that tiers above it for relatively cheap. But now, basically, that recipe, at the end of it, you get a huge globe. Hopefully there'll be some footage in the background of it right now. An immense thing in your guild hall that looks just like, and is the same size as that massive globe showing what could potentially be ley lines in the order of Whisper's Chantry of Secret. Now, don't read into that ley line idea too much. I actually think that if you really inspect it properly, they're probably not ley lines. But still, it is massive. The biggest decoration that's ever gone into the game is right here. And I don't even think I talked about it in my specific decorating or scribing videos and stuff. So that was a little fix there. And a nice little end to the horrendous design behind the original globe that they'd had in the game. Again, I like the idea of prestige stuff, but if you put a prestige decoration in there, it needs to be big or it needs to be super flashy. And I think we got both with this actually now. Next, Ben had a little bit to say about fractals. This was very cool because, as you guys know, since Heart of Thorns came out, I haven't fractaled really at all. I have the past couple of weeks in our 0 to Hero challenge because I think the community has identified, or at least my stream chat has identified, that the fastest way to get an ascended back piece is to start out on fractals progression for the legendary back piece. And to me, based on what I've seen, fractals are a huge mess. Like, just look at the hub area. Look at the way that the masteries interact with things. Look at the way that you get gear that you can infuse. Look at the different types of agony that there is and the different ways of crafting agony and all the different vendors and the different kinds of potions. And, oh, this gives you AR, but this doesn't stack with this kind of AR. This goes in this slot. This doesn't go in this slot, and so on and so on. It's unbelievable. It's a huge, huge mess. And Ben, with the spring update, was tasked with trying to improve this mess. Well, good luck there, mate. Especially people have liked the changes to the Cliffside Fractal, which, since the changes to the Dredge Fractal a while ago, where the clown car now doesn't take so long and things are a bit more streamlined, the Cliffside Fractal has just been far too long and was really fiddly at certain moments as well with the double seals. He gave a little bit of his perspective from the side of having designed that change. No hints at what the next big Fractal is that is going to be changing, by the way. But this idea we got from the patch notes that they want to keep improving fractals so that as they scale from 0 to 100, it's more than just becoming meat shields and you know, very tanky and do more damage, is essentially what he's echoing here. And then there was the little joke that we started this video out with. But not too much more to say on the fractal section, really. What I would like to see them do with the fractals, though, is take that gorilla, that branded gorilla mechanic, or what? Well, it's not actually a gorilla mechanic. I just want to see it on the Risen gorillas, where we see with the Shatterer overhaul that enemies can knock you into a CC chain and it will never end unless you somebody else breaks the break bar of the opponent. I'd love to see that kind of stuff being put more into fractals as well, because again, it's break bars, and break bars scale very well with the difficulty idea. You know, reducing the windows of reaction time that players get and so on, which should be very, very cool. All right, let's move on to the next section. The next section, McKenna returns, but with Tyler Beers and Carl McLean, and generally they're talking about world versus world. They start by talking a little bit about the reward tracks, and I do think this has been an important update for World versus World. If you rewind the clock to 6 months after the launch of Guild Wars 2, you had PvEers who were generally happy and getting a lot of money, and then you had PvPers and World vs. Worlders both saying, hold on, I basically get nothing from my game type. I mean, back then, PvP really basically got nothing. They had their own progression system for gear and everything. And, you know, they were a bit upset. So PvP got a fix to this, shall we just say, in very blunt terms, a fix through rewards tracks. You don't really hear pure PvPers complaining about not getting enough money. You just don't, because they get more than enough money to pay for their unlocks and so on, and then bring into the other game types. They're fine with their reward tracks at the moment. But World versus World, year after year, well into year 3, those guys have not been rewarded, and it's because it's a very slippery slope. You don't necessarily want people to only be in World versus World for the rewards, because that narrows player objectives to things that aren't necessarily conducive to the map design and the idea of the Mist's War and fighting for your server. But then you don't want the rewards so low that nobody goes there at all, which is kind of the category we were in a little bit more. And then also with specifically how you implement the rewards, you have to make sure they can't like be AFK'd, right? Like, so like people wanted more rewards for defending. They wanted more credit for certain areas, especially like scouting related activities. And it's like, well, how do you do that without making it so that people just park their alt accounts in, you know, random little towers and stuff, and essentially just get loads of contribution and experience and gold and stuff without ever having to do anything, you know, just basically AFK farming. And this is not a game about AFK farming. So it was kind of a difficult challenge for them, but I guess they realized, look, if reward tracks worked for PvP, why can't they work for World vs. World? And the devs seem to think this has been a big hit. I've not spent enough time in World vs. World to assess it myself. I have heard some contrarian opinions to this, where people are basically saying, well, now, World vs. World, all I ever feel like I'm focusing on ever is the reward tracks. I'm only doing this, 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 and this because of the reward track. It's all about the reward track. It's all about the reward track. And maybe there's a little bit of a sense of that in the community. I'd love to hear what you guys think about that. Any World vs. Worlders who've been watching this, like whether that balance is a little bit off there. But people in World vs. World are now, hopefully, in the future, going to start feeling more rewarded. I'm curious, though, once everyone in World vs. World has got like their full set of World vs. World specific armor and all that stuff, I'm curious whether people will, you know, exhaust the reward tracks and then start feeling unrewarded again. We'll see how much length, what distance this system can run. But yeah, they were talking a bit about the reward tracks. They also talked about the stability change. I think I've covered this enough, and there wasn't really anything too crazy that they revealed, but they did say that it was a lot of tweaking, like exactly how low this internal cooldown on stability stack stripping should be was a difficult number to get to, and it's still, as far as it sounds, only a tentative number. That's what I'm hearing all the time on these streams, by the way. They seem to put changes in and always consider them tentative. And I wonder whether that's why the table just feels like it grows too much, because there are too many tentative changes that go in and then eventually stuff starts slipping through the cracks. And lastly, and this is something I really do want to talk about because I feel like I didn't do it enough justice, they spent a while talking about the new graphic option to Cull Effect LOD. So I did mention this on my Big Spring patch, but from the sounds of this stream, it was not an easy thing to implement and maybe had a lot more work in it than actually ended up getting credited. And I do want to start playing with it. You may start seeing it in my videos. So just to remind you guys, this is a new take on the idea of culling down the crazy, explosive, massive nonsense that happens in any kind of world boss or large Zerg style gameplay. So it's a checkbox you can turn on in your options that just dulls out everyone else's, maybe even yours as well to an extent, skill effects, making things more visible. But it's a difficult balance because you have to cull certain things away, but you also have to keep certain things very visible. For example, the average PvEer would not like this feature if it culled away time warps to the point where you can't ever see them. Or, you know, important wells that you want to stand in for a little bit more alacrity from Mesmers, for example. Or some of these big key effects you do want to see, and the second that this option hits one of those skills, at any point in any balance, in any meta throughout the game's history as it goes forward now and changes occur, when that happens, people won't like the feature. So it's a really delicate balance. It's a delicate balance right now for today's skills that people like, and it will be a delicate balance to maintain in the future as well, when, say, some random other arbitrary skill with a very small effect on it suddenly becomes quite important. Hard stuff to deal with, and sounds like it had a lot of work that went into all the individual effects, trying to just cull them down, make them look like the same thing, just more dull. And I hadn't even considered that it might be really good, or a lot of work went into it, and I feel a little bit bad about that. So hopefully you guys in the upcoming videos will start seeing the fruits of that labor, and hopefully Guild Wars 2 in general, to spectate across all formats, will be a little bit easier for people now, because people will be utilizing that option. Should be good. And that kind of came bundled in with the World versus World section for obvious reasons.
What can we do that's awful?
Yeah, that's the first thing I always ask the team. I'm like, what can we do that's going to make everybody upset?
The final section was with Hugh going it solo, talking about PvP-related stuff. Now, there was a thread on the forums a little while ago I'd missed, in which Hugh was talking to people about the state of Skyhammer and how they would like to see changes. And a lot of this section was kind of just Hugh talking about feedback he got and the best kind of way to deliver feedback to devs and stuff. But there was a lot of cool talk about their goals with Spirit Watch and Skyhammer particularly. These were the two big ones affected with the spring patch. And Arenanet's attempts to make these feel capable of being ranked maps. Skyhammer, now that it's got none of the flaws that you can fall down, now that it's got none of the areas you can be knocked back, now that the primary mechanic has been minimalized to the point where it only spawns at little intervals throughout the map, Skyhammer's lost a lot of its flavor, and it's so flavorless, I think, you know, that makes it very viable for a ranked map now. That tends to be a hard balance here. So he was talking about the feedback he'd got and how, generally speaking, the community had been quite positive instead of just blasting Skyhammer and acting like it could never be anywhere remotely close to being ranked viable. And the same with Spirit Watch. Spirit Watch has a combination of conquest and capture the flag in it, and the idea is, how do we minimize the orb mechanic to make it really just feel like a secondary part of the map instead of such a huge main focus? I mean, the original implementation of Spirit Watch, the orb would respawn just a matter of seconds after you ran the first one, so people could be spending full time doing it. And if you are focusing too much on the orbs while a couple of your friends think that they should be focusing on conquest, and that communication isn't there, as it frankly isn't in most solo queues, all of a sudden the map feels kind of clunky and weird to play. And so the changes are to diminish that effect and to make it really feel clear when you're trying to go for the orb or when you're trying to go for the conquest style stuff, and keep the conquest style stuff the focus of the map in general. And I think they did pretty well with that. He also talked about how there was a big class imbalance with the orb before this patch, where certain classes, through super speed and certain movement abilities, would be far better orb runners than others, and they wanted that kind of to be a level playing field where all classes were about as good as each other to run it. I don't know how I feel about that specifically. I liked the asymmetry there, and I liked the idea that you would run a certain comp when it came to that map that meant you had like a dedicated guy who ran the orb because his class was a little better at it. I thought that added some interesting detail to the overarching game. But I think the reason that they're trying to push away from that is also seen in the Skyhammer changes as well, in that they don't want these outlier maps that have wildly specific different comps for them. Maybe that's a good idea for hot joins, maybe that's a good idea for unranked, but I think they want all of their ranked maps. The general team comps you see go into those maps are consistent across the board, and I think that's the eventual goal. And they've started down that road with Spirit Watch. Hugh openly admitted that there were a couple of traits that he might have missed that were still a bit useful, like Daredevils, for example, can still dodge 3 times, while other people can only dodge twice while holding it. That stuff's still getting hammered out. Don't forget the maps are supposedly in betas, and they are supposed to be real betas, and eventually when that tag gets removed, that's when we'll know that it's sort of set in stone. So yeah, that was kind of the live stream. I wish that I had a little bit more to talk to you guys about. I may have missed a Super Adventure Box related one the week before it, but there wasn't one this week either, so I did a bit of a deeper dive on this. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and that's pretty much it. I guess I'll leave you with one last question, and hopefully it doesn't sound too negative, because it's not meant to be, but I'm wondering this. What are your guys' impressions after a little while now of the spring update? Was it really that good? Are we still all playing a lot? Are we still all enjoying? Or was it just kind of, hey, actual new stuff, and it's worn its welcome already, maybe? So that could be a pretty interesting topic to dive into. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. My impression still overall that it is still fantastically positive, and I'm loving that all the different areas of the game are actually viably fun and rewarding, but we shall see. Anyway, thanks guys. I hope to see you tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get another guild chat soon enough with some more juicy details. But until next time, have a wonderful evening, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. And I made promises on a stream, and I shouldn't have. So a couple of months ago, those of you who watch will know what I'm about to do here. A couple of months ago, while we were streaming whatever we were doing in game, the door went, so I ran off to collect my mail.